Ladies and gentlemen, the United States was established on Judeo-Christian principles. You see that reflected in the Mayflower Compact, you see it reflected in the Declaration of Independence and in the Constitution, and of course, the Bill of Rights. And it is part of our values, the Judeo-Christian principles are a part of our legal system. And we see that highlighted in laws that emphasize our freedom. For example, in the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment speaks to religious freedom, freedom of speech, to write what you want to write, to of course, petition the government, and to peacefully assemble. So we see those freedoms, especially the freedom of speech, disappearing in the United States today, and it's deeply disturbing. And I wanted to talk about that for a moment today, because when I was listening to the House impeachment managers, Democrats, talk about how the president was evil and he committed criminal conduct, which of course he did not. You cannot criminalize President Trump's conduct because he used words like fight or fight back or fight on. How many times have we heard such luminaries? Well, we might not have heard them, but we've seen video clips of historical luminaries in American history, like Martin Luther King Jr., talk about fighting against injustice. And President Trump and the American people across the country have talked about fighting back against issues related to the lack of election integrity. You know, President Trump at that rally on January 6th used words, as the Democrats have pointed out today and by their impeachment managers, he used words like fight and fight back. But again, we as a people, 75 million Americans, were deeply concerned over the massive voter fraud. You say, well, there was no massive voter fraud. I have to take issue with that, because things like ballot harvesting, things like mail-in ballots that were counted 2 and 3 and 4 times on those Dominion machines when the name Biden appeared as the choice for president. I mean, I don't know if you caught it. I talked about it on my broadcast, and I put up links for all of you to see about hundreds of Americans across the country, especially in those swing states, sometimes thousands, going to their state house in the dead of winter after the election and testifying at their state houses. If you recall, back in November and December, the state legislatures, particularly in places like Georgia and Wisconsin, Michigan, where there was a voter fraud, they had their legislature reconvene in terms of having specific oversight committees take testimony. So these people, expressed their heartfelt concern and disturbance over the fact that they witnessed voter fraud. So to hear these impeachment managers say, well, the president incited this riot and he's guilty and he should never be able to serve in office again, is ludicrous to me. Because I don't know a civil rights activist that hasn't talked about fighting back and of course not meaning it all violently. Martin Luther King Jr., Mahatma Gandhi from India, Rosa Parks. Throughout our history and other histories in other nations, they've talked about peaceful protest. And that's why the president said, take a walk back to the Capitol and let your voices be heard peacefully and patriotically. So to suggest that a law and order president like President Trump, who has stood for and with the police and has stood for and with the military, would suggest that now people go nuts and break the windows of the Capitol building and go after and try to beat up people in our Congress is ludicrous. I just thought the whole thing was ridiculous and ludicrous today. And I thought about, I want you to know, ever since COVID started, I've worn this mask. This is the mask I've worn. I've worn it in Los Angeles County, Kern County, up in Northern California. That mask has been with me. I clean it with peroxide or alcohol, to kill the germs. But I've worn that mask since I received that mask, right after word came about COVID. And I can't tell you how many times people walked up to me of all colors. I mean, black, brown, yellow, and white, and have whispered to me in public. I'm thinking of this woman, a black family, and I was standing in line, and she turned to me and she says, "Oh, you are so brave that you're wearing that mask, and you're here in the Los Angeles area. We're going to vote for President Trump's reelection also." And it amazes me, from professional people to essential workers who've whispered in public of how they're going to vote for Trump, but we're too afraid that a coworker or somebody else would hear that they were a Trump supporter. That's dangerous. It felt disturbing to me as an American citizen who's, by the way, in case you didn't know, the United States was one of the first countries that actually drafted and had adopted a Bill of Rights. France beat us to it. France drafted their Bill of Rights, I believe it was in 1789. I had it written, my talking points. France adopted a Bill of Rights called the Declaration of Human Rights and of Our Citizens. And so they beat us to it. And isn't it interesting that Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence and was the third president of the United States of America, he was working with French leaders to draft their Bill of Rights. And then, of course, in America 2 years later, well, actually the very next year, in 1790, the United States of America, our founding fathers, were drafting our Bill of Rights, and by 1791, it was adopted. I just am pointing to the fact that historically, we've embraced freedom of speech. And it's incredible to me that people in all walks of life and various ethnic groups are whispering to each other that they're a Trump supporter, especially if they think someone in their place of employment is going to hear about it, because they're worried about a backlash. I want to share something else with you. It just came to my attention that a U.S. Army soldier was arrested because he was working to assist ISIS, the Islamic State. Remember them? They cut the heads off children. They cut children in half. They tortured parents in front of their children. They crucified children and adults. They burned people alive in cages that disagreed with Islam, that didn't embrace Islam and didn't embrace their very strict form of adherence to Islam. So if you were a moderate Muslim and you didn't embrace ISIS or the Islamic State's view of how to practice Islam, you could lose your life. So we've got this U.S. Army soldier that was, arrested, he wanted to kill U.S. servicemen and women. And, I think about things like that. And, we're not supposed to talk about jihadism. I read this report. Alejandro Mayorkas, he's now the new Homeland Security chief, the U.S. Homeland Security secretary. And he says one of the greatest threats that we face currently in our homeland is from domestic terrorism. I don't know about that at all. I've had top secret clearances for a number of years, and jihadists and jihadist cells that are running with Mexican drug cartels or other South American drug cartels still remain a great threat to the United States here in the homeland as well as overseas. So I thought it was interesting that this Alejandro is talking about domestic terrorism, because who is considered a domestic terrorist today? What are leftists? What are liberal progressives? What are the Democrats saying to you and I? They're saying white people that wore this mask or wore the MAGA hat are white supremacists. I don't even know of anyone who would at any point in time treat somebody that was a different color than they were unkind because they were a different color. Now they might be rude to them or treat them unkindly if that person was rude or unkind to them, or there were another set of circumstances going on. You know what I'm talking about. But to be unkind to somebody over their ethnicity, I mean, how often do you actually see that? I just have never seen that wherever I've worked, and I've worked in private enterprise. I've worked at a think tank and done, where we did contract work for the Department of Defense, the CIA, the State Department, DARPA. I mean, I've been a lot of places. I've seen a lot of things, but I haven't seen racism. In fact, I guess the closest I've gotten to racism is when I've heard people say anti-Semitic things against the Jewish people. Who, by the way, in case you're anti-Semitic, think about it for a moment. The Jewish people introduced monotheism into the earth realm, and then they gave us the Bible, the inspired word of God. There wasn't a single Gentile that wrote a single book in the Bible that Christians around the globe read today, and Jews around the globe read today in terms of their Torah. So, I mean, and Moses gave us the 10 Commandments, and that's the bedrock of part of our justice system here in not only the United States, but in the Western world. So, you ought not be anti-Semitic or say hateful or unkind things against the Jewish people. They've made tremendous number of contributions to the world. But I think we really need to, as people on the right, whether you want to call yourself a Republican or a conservative or an independent. If you're an independent, I know that doesn't necessarily mean you're on the right. If you're a moderate Republican, we still need to come together, because this is deeply disturbing that people can't talk about the fact that they supported the former president of the United States and that we're being referred to as, especially if you're white, as domestic terrorists and racist. That's wrong. And again, I hope that if you can, you will pick up the phone and call the Capitol switchboard. Would you put that number up for us, please? Call the Capitol switchboard. I don't think I have that number handy. Call them. It's on the screen. Tell those Democrats that, you know what? It's okay to be a Trump supporter, because we loved President Trump because of what he did for us. He lowered our taxes. He cared about our veterans. He supported the military. He supported the police. He brought about prison reform, and people that were black, brown, yellow, and white were getting out of prison for things that they should have perhaps never been in prison for, or if they had, they should have gotten a sentence that was somehow commensurate with a crime that they committed, and it wasn't. So, I mean, this president has done so much. Look at the peace and stability that he helped bring to the Middle East, which affects the whole world. I mean, Israelis are going to Arab countries now, and Arabs from places like Bahrain or the United Arab Emirates are going to Israel. They're communicating. They're talking, not as though they they had not spoken to one another before. But I mean, it's public. It's out there. It's freedom. And I just, there's so much we could go into, but people voted for president because it was America first. When I think about all the jobs that were created for people of all colors here in the United States, we got down to almost zero unemployment in this country. That is incredible. Space Force, because China and Russia are weaponizing space. I mean, we could go on and on and on. But in fact, I want to share one other thing. I was reading an article. This is from the Epoch Times. In communist China, I mean, talk about this. This reminds me of Black Lives Matter, Antifa, and other anarchists, and the Democrats. Because in China right now, they're burning books. What else does that remind you? Remind you of the Holocaust and Kristallnacht. They're burning books. They're burning Bibles. They're burning any religious book, from whether it's a Christian or some other religious minority in China. They're burning books. They're burning magazines. They're burning newspapers. They're burning anything and everything that doesn't agree with the Communist Party's line in China. What do we see the Democrats doing today? The Democrats are trying to destroy the lives of everybody who supported this president and really believes in their heart of hearts that there was tremendous voter fraud based on what they heard, maybe what they saw, what they experienced, what they know to be true. I'll never forget, this was, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago. I was interviewing somebody that was running for here in California, they were running for this state Secretary of State's position here in this state. And he was sharing on another show I was doing that the voter rolls are so bad here in the state of California that there's tremendous voter fraud because we have so many dead people on the rolls because the rolls have never been cleaned or purged of dead people. Or we have so many people that, a long time ago they moved out of the state and they're voting in another state, but people are using their name to vote and commit voter fraud in the state of California. So, and he shared a whole lot of things, excellent examples. I mean, he really knew all about voting. And of course, that's one of the chief responsibilities of a Secretary of State on the state level, is to deal with elections and the integrity of elections. And in fact, he says California has one of the lowest rankings for voter integrity or election integrity than the entire nation. And that was deeply disturbing to me as someone who lives in the state of California. But I'm just saying, I know for a fact, based on looking at reports and interviewing individuals and doing the research, there was tremendous voter fraud. So it's disturbing that people can't talk about it. That the president couldn't say, let's fight back. Let's fight on. Let's move forward and deal with this problem because it is a problem in the United States. Okay, well, I hope that you'll share this out because we've got to get serious, you and I, about fighting back against the left. We've got to get serious this year about fighting the Democrats. And I'm not talking about being violent. I'm talking about educating the voting public on what they need to understand. And the Democrats are taking this country to a very dark place. And they're telling people to basically be violent. I mean, how many times have we had members in Congress? We've heard members of Congress over the last 4 years tell their constituents to get in the face of people like me that were wearing the mask. And I'm telling you, there were times I felt threatened wearing my mask. I've been called a racist. I said something about jihadism in the classroom. You may have heard this story. I said in front of my students one evening, it was one of my night classes, And I said something about how we're going to continue to fight Islamic terrorism going forward in the 21st century. And, you know, a sweet little thing, a Muslim young woman from Yemen who immigrated here. I don't know if she immigrated here lawfully or not, but here she is. And she went right to the administration and said I was a racist because I said, you know, we're going to have to keep fighting Islamic terrorism going forward in the 21st century. Just a nothing, just a passing comment. And I had to face an attorney. I had to answer questions because they wanted to make sure I was, you know, a good instructor, good educator, that I really didn't have any racist tendencies. Anyway, it's just incredible how they'll literally try to destroy your career and your life. And we've got to fight back. But of course, as the president has said, peacefully and patriotically. Thank you for listening.
President Trump has correctly stated that economic security is national security, and in the Tehachapi Mountains of Kern County resides a United States defense contractor, Denice Products. Here is the Silicon Valley of the aerospace industry, right here in East Kern. Denice Products is a forward-leaning manufacturer and distributor of hardware sold to major defense and aerospace companies. We're talking about Boeing, Lockheed Martin, United Technologies, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon General Electric, and on the list goes, as well as to every United States ally worldwide, including Israel, America's most important strategic ally in the Middle East. And for everything that flies, Denice Products is providing the parts. And with me today is the president of Denice Products, Scott Baker. Hi, Scott.
How you doing?
You believe this corner of Kern County is the hub of the aerospace industry.
Well, this portion of Southern California here out in the Antelope Valley, it contains, you know, some of the most cutting edge technology going on in aviation today. You know, we have some of the UCAS programs with unmanned technologies going on. We have Edwards Air Force Base out here who's doing continual testing in their area. We have the Naval Weapons Station up there at China Lake doing some fantastic cutting edge stuff, cruise missile technology, and those things are going on. We have Scale Composites locally doing a lot of composite technology, which is new. We have SpaceX, which is a private entity putting things into space now. This area is the growth center for aviation's future, and this is the area I think that as a nation we need to be concentrating some of our effort and taking this technology. And as we all know, with the space program from Apollo years ago, out of these technologies, we the private sector are going to reap some of the benefits of that.
Thank you, Scott. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Baker, president of Denice Products. Denice Products, located in the beautiful mountains of Tehachapi, California, in eastern Kern County, is home to some of the most innovative and specialized technologies in the world, including those at the U.S. Naval Air Warfare Center, Weapons Division at China Lake, Edwards Air Force Base, as well as Strata Launch, launching satellites capable of delivering multiple orbits in a single flight to space. And it is Denice Products that has provided the manufactured devices, and the president, Scott Baker of Denice Products, Marine Corps veteran, reactivated on 9/11 to monitor threats to the homeland, is carrying on a tradition of providing for the security of the United States by manufacturing every kind of fastener on anything that flies, as well as providing a full testing destructive laboratory. Contact Denice Products, now in business for 30 years, at 661-822-6873. Located at 1314 Goodrich Drive in Tehachapi for your manufacturing and testing needs today.